welcome to Fight Week. How you feeling?
Feel good, man. Happy to be back. It took a pretty long break for me, and I'm excited. I think you're always excited, but I'm happy, so that's important, I think.
Was the break planned thing, or was it anything else that just sort of kept you away for a little bit?
Well, I fought 6 times in 14 months. From the time I made my debut to my last fight, I think me and Kevin Holland were the most active guys in the UFC. And I think sometimes, the way to get out from a loss is to just push it and go find a win. And then other times maybe you need to pull the reins a little bit, take a little break, get physically, mentally right, and decide, is this what I want to keep doing? And it was good, man. I have good people around me. They're like, hey, let's chill 6 months to a year. I think it's been 8 months since my last fight. And I really dove into coaching for those first few months and got to travel with some guys, and that was really important and good. And, like I said, it's put me in a good place mentally, physically to come back and hopefully have a great performance.
I'm going to say a lot of times, we know that the physical is one of the things, but it seems like the mental is almost the most important factor that you need to have in check going into a fight. But you feel, if anything else, that time away, you were able to kind of clear the head and just think of other things?
Yeah, for sure. And, there's no balance in your life when you're in camp. So, being dad, being husband, being those things, it's hard to check those boxes and have a camp. And 6 fights in 14 months, you're never out of camp. So I'm lucky I have a great support system. My wife, she fought in the UFC, so she gets it. But it was good to get back to, checking some of the boxes at home and fulfilling some of those values and just letting my head rest. Concussions are for real. And I think sometimes we try to jump back on the horse too quick. But I took time off, and I feel better than I ever have. So I think it was good.
And a lot of times with concussions, like you said, that's a very, very serious one, and sometimes the effects of it last longer than most people think. So when you get into the training camp, what sort of things do you change because of that? Is it less heavy sparring? Is it less this or that? I mean, how do you approach training after that fact?
So I have a great neuro team, Barrowis, Colorado, and so it's just doing a lot of extra work. We train our muscles and strength and conditioning. We train our cardio. We train our skills in MMA, but very little of the time do we train our actual brain. And so we just focused on that, some light work, some things like that I feel like have helped me bounce back. But concussions are a serious thing, and if you don't address them, they're just going to add up and continue to be a problem. So I'm glad we addressed it, and I feel great.
When we talk about training, Julian's a guy that you've trained with before and that you've had a history. How much of that plays into a fight? Or is the fact that you guys train ever at any point, at some point in the past, is that even relevant in a current fight situation?
Yeah, Julian, I would say Julian's a friend. We're not best friends, but we're friendly, and I don't wish anything bad upon Julian. We're both in a spot where you can't say no, right? I'm on the last fight of my deal. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. So when the UFC calls, you got to say yes. And I don't know how it's going to affect. I've never fought someone that I trained with, I would imagine that he's comfortable with kind of knowing what I'm going to do, and I'm comfortable knowing what he's going to do. And we'll see how it plays out on fight night. We train together for an extended period of time. So I feel like we both know what we bring to the table, and I think it'll be a good fight.
And he kind of mentioned that as well, that, it's you guys are friends, but it's nothing personal. It's just business. You can just kind of switch things off. But I guess that kind of alluding to what you said there. So the UFC came with you and said, hey, and presented the name. It wasn't like you were like, who should I fight? How about Julian?
Right.
So the UFC came to you with that name.
Yeah, they offered it, and like I said, there's not a long list of options. It's like, hey, here's who you have, and do you take it or don't take it. Originally I was supposed to fight Ryan Loder. For whatever reason, that fight fell out, and then they came with Julian, and so we made it happen.
And when you look at Julian, like we said, outside of what you've seen in training, where's he dangerous, and what sort of things do you see him bringing into this fight?
Julian's a tough dude, man. He comes forward. He has power. He does a good job switching stances. He has good submissions, tricky submissions from the front headlock series. And more than anything, like I said, he's tough. And I feel like if people on paper look at this fight, they're going to say, Cody has some skills. He performs well. And then when he becomes the nail, he has a hard time being the nail. And Julian is great at being a nail. And then he beats a lot of people by being the nail. And so I feel like the narrative maybe is Cody's going to break and Julian's going to maybe go through the storm and beat him. And it's my job to prove that I'm not going to break, right? But we just got to wait till fight night to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And like you said, after taking a break and then, now getting back in there after dealing with concussions and just time away and just dealing, is a win enough to feel like things have been righted, or do you really need like a definitive sort of like, here I am back, the ship has been righted?
Yeah, I don't really give a fuck about the result. I think I put so much pressure on myself for a result before I took this break, and it was like, man, I'm chasing this result. I'm chasing this result. I'm chasing this result, and it just wasn't working out. And then when I did win, it was like, man, I feel really good for like an hour, and I'd be like, fuck, I get to do, my reward is I got to go do this against somebody better, in 3 months. And so when I put it on result, it wasn't fulfilling. And so it's more just, fighting brings me joy. It's my passion. It's what I love to do, whether I'm coaching, training, fighting. And it took me a minute to find that again. And I'm just happy, man. I'm in a really good place. I'm happy to be back in the cage. I haven't felt that in a long time. I feel like there's always excitement, but I have real happiness, real joy to get back in there and continue the streak. I've been fortunate that I've had guys like Yusuf Zalal bring me with them for their fights to corner him, Dustin Jacoby, David Onama, and we've been on a hot streak. And being around those guys, I think the biggest thing I learned is like, hey, man, you're not alone in the feelings that you have and the worries and the concerns, and just trying to pick their brains and see how they deal with it and then apply it to myself has been huge. And I'm excited to show the improvements come Saturday.
That's incredible. It's great to hear where your head's at, and not to dwell on the past. But when you said, you were mentioning before, like, is this still fun? Do I want to still do that? How close were you to a point where you're like, is it a matter of a conversation with loved ones? You're like, am I that close to being done? Or how close were you to possibly ending your fighting days?
So I was done. I was not going to fight. That first month after that fight was rough, man. I was in a very bad headspace. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it wasn't good. The people around me know where I was at, and it was a thought-out decision. It wasn't like you lose a fight and you're like, man, I'm done fighting. It was like, hey, over this month, like, I don't know if the consequences are worth it. And then I was kind of letting a lot of people on the outside steal my joy. Not like people that I know, people that I don't know, right? And I think that was a problem. That was an issue I had to work through. But then my coach, I think, Coach Mark, he's been in the game a long time, and I think he knew that I wasn't really done, that I had more to give. But he just had to keep me around the sport. And so he was like, hey, I want you to come be a full-time coach. I want you to coach our team. And so I took on the coaching role for about 3 months. And then, I kind of want to get back to training, get in there, kick it with the boys, and it was fun. And then I was like, man, maybe if they give me a good offer, right, like I'll say yes. Maybe I'll come back and do it again. And coach was like, yeah, we'll see if that's what you want to do. He wasn't like pushing me or anything. And then they called me with Ryan Loder, and I was like, man, I like that matchup. I think it's a great matchup, and I miss it. I want to get back, and I want to get back for me. I don't want to get back for any other reason. I just want to get back because it's something I love to do. It gives me purpose. And, then I sat down with my wife and my coaches and my friends, and they're like, hey, man, you have a lot to give. You have a ton of talent. Let's just see where we can take this thing and enjoy it. And if after this fight, I'm like, man, I'm good, then I'll be good. And if not, I'll continue to fight. I'm not looking crazy far in the future. I just am in a spot where it's what I love to do. It brings me a lot of happiness, and as long as it does that, I'm going to continue to do it.
That's great to hear, because I feel like we see other fighters and other people get to that situation where they balance that and they're trying to figure it out. And I'm glad you found your reason. And I know every fighter needs to find their own reason to why they want to get in there. But I guess if there was a fighter, if there was somebody that was on the fence maybe and they were down and out, what sort of thing would you tell them, or what would be your advice to maybe push them to maybe find a way, or maybe find their why as to get back in there?
Yeah, I think maybe step away from where you're at. Like if you're going to the gym every day and trying to figure it out, it's going to be tough. Like be away from it and realize, man, do I even miss this shit? Do I even miss it? Because if you don't miss it, it's a pretty good indication that you don't want to do it, right? And I think removing yourself from result is huge. We talked about it a little bit already, but when you put your hopes and dreams on the result, it's not going to work out a lot of the times. Even when you win, winning's a lonely place too. So I think don't focus on the result, and if you need to step away, actually step away. You see a lot of fighters like, man, I might be done, I might be not done, and they're kind of half-assing training, and they're in the gym, but they're not in the gym, and it's like, man, you got to get all the way away from it and decide, like, is this what I want to do or not?
Yeah, and I know you're not one to put a lot of pressure on yourself for this, but I guess just looking at this fight, Saturday night, I'm sure it's played out in your head multiple ways. What are the keys to the victory for you to get your arm raised? What needs to happen on Saturday to get that W?
I've been looking at it like 15 one-minute fights. I feel like sometimes a 15-minute fight can be overwhelming. It's hard to be courageous for 15 minutes, but it's not hard to be courageous for a minute. And I think fighting's a scary thing. Anyone who tells you different is lying, and it's an ego thing, but fighting's a scary thing. And I think 15 one-minute fights, if you win 8 of them, you win the fight. So kind of letting the fight happen on my timing, not rushing things. I've gotten into some trouble because I want to get out of there so bad because I'm scared, right? I'll be honest. I get scared. I'm like, even when I'm having success, I've had fights where I've had tons of success and then I'll lose because I'm trying to get out of there chasing a finish. And I think just letting it happen, man, and having joy to be in there takes away a lot of that fear. And so that's what I look forward to doing on Saturday.
Best of luck on Saturday.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks, man, for taking the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And by the way, on behalf of everybody, because we get to see you guys' wins, losses, mistakes, $50,000 bonuses, blah, 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 that it's all on TV.
Yeah.
You know, you'll never know when I messed up. You get to see it on the biggest stage. So thanks for being so transparent.
Yeah, definitely.
And honest, man. I see you. And if anything, you mentioned we're not talking about the bad and the bad headspace. We're moving right past that. But can we shout out the people who were there that gave you that inspiration, and the family that made you feel good again? And you're like, man, I do have the right people around me. Like, I know I do.
Yeah, so my wife is, she's a rock star. I've kind of talked about my daughter, my oldest daughter, Kingsley. Sorry.
Is that the K, the iced out K?
Yeah. So she has a super rare genetic condition, and I've talked about it before, but it was crazy. Like, we got this fight, and she's in intensive therapy. She's 4 years old. She's in intensive therapy, like all the time, 4 hours a day. Like, if any of you guys have kids, getting a toddler to do anything for 4 hours a day is hard. Getting a toddler to do work for 4 hours a day is damn near impossible. And I wasn't really able to be there for a lot of it because I was in camp. And I'm just fortunate that my wife, she's a rock star, and she crushed that for us. And it makes it easy to not bail on training when your daughter has to go work. She's in fight camp too, and I see her going, and I'm like, man, I don't really want to go to the gym today. And I just look at her. I'm like, well, she can't say no, so fuck it. I guess I got to go make it happen. But yeah, and then like my coaches, my team, I just have such good people around me, man. And if it wasn't for them, like, I don't know where I'd be at right now, to be honest. And it wouldn't be a good place. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir. It's a beautiful thing. The wife, you, baby girl, it's just a fighting family.
Yeah.
My gosh. And now we're coming back. How cool is it? And I mentioned this with Marquez, that we know this is going to be a banger. Everybody knows it. Internet knows it. UFC knows it. We know it. But they put you guys on the co-main. Let you know, like, hey, man, wins, losses, whatever. We got ourselves a heater this weekend.
Yeah. I think, if you'd asked me that like 6 months ago or a year ago, I would have been like, oh, it's no big deal. I don't care. But I do care. I'm glad I'm co-main. I'm not going to apologize to anybody. I know people have issue with it, but I'm glad I am. And like you said, it's because people know we both come to finish the fight. We're going to meet in the middle, and someone's going to go to sleep. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. We're both finishers, and this is my 11th fight in the UFC. I'm young in the sport. I only got in the UFC in 2021, so it hasn't been a ton of time, but I feel like I'm a vet, and so I've earned that spot, and I'm happy to go perform and put on a great fight.
Being a vet like that, because Marquez has kind of a homecoming. They know my contender series, yada, yada, yada. But the veteran thing, how is that like? You can't put this on your resume, if you will. That you only know the secrets. But what are the things that kind of you bring that we won't ever know about as a veteran? Like the little tricks, the little controlling your breathing, fighting the demons, like kind of like quieting just the noise.
I think the biggest thing is a positive thing is just being present, man. It takes you a long time to figure out how to be present. I don't regret any of the results in my fights. Shit happens, man. Fighting's fighting, but there are moments that I regret. I regret, being at UFC 300 and not being present and being like, man, if I beat Bo Nickel, like, what's going to happen next? Like, what does this do for me and my family? And I didn't even get to enjoy the greatest card in UFC history that I was lucky enough and privileged enough to be a part of. And so, like, I just won't ever do that to myself again. Fighting in the UFC is a privilege. Getting to be here is something I never thought I'd be able to do when I was an 18-year-old kid watching it on TV. And if you would have said, Cody, you're going to be in the UFC, you're going to have multiple fights in the UFC, you're going to have wins, you're going to have performance bonuses, I would have laughed in your face because there's just no way I really believe that. But I'm here now, and I'm grateful, and I'm thankful that I get to be here. And, yeah, I'm excited, man. Co-main, it's awesome.
Let's go. I'm already hyped up for this one, but let's make this your UFC 300 on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate you, brother.
I mean.
Thanks, guys.